really was a disaster for India. President Obama, from the beginning, from coming in, he's always been talking about outsourcing. And what does outsourcing mean? It's a code word for India.
Sure.
What else?
I don't know about that.
I think the time has come now to tell Obama, this is really the wrong thing to do. It really spoils the ethos, creates anti-Indian sentiment.
That's what people are going to be listening for. That's the debate that you deserve.
He really was a disaster for India.
Hello and welcome to We Mean Business. With President Obama being re-elected to power, the debate over his anti-outsourcing stance and its impact in India has been reignited, more so after scathing comments from Professor Bhagwati of Columbia University on how the US President was dealing with the issue. So is Obama's second term going to be any different from an outsourcing point of view? And what really is the Indian IT industry expecting? Joining me to debate that is an expert panel of guests. Amit Nivsarkar, VP Global Trade and Development at NASSCOM, joins us from New Delhi. Also joining us from New Delhi is Vishnu Dusad, the MD and CEO of Nucleus Software. In our Mumbai studios, we have Pradeep Udas, partner of KPMG, and joining in on the link from Mumbai is also Keshav Murugesh, the CEO of WNS. But before we begin our discussion, in fact, let's listen in to Professor Jagdish Bhagwati and some of his comments when he spoke to my colleague Shweta Rajpal Kohli earlier this week.
Professor Bhagwati, also Indo-US relations.
Yeah.
Should India necessarily be celebrating Obama's victory given the kind of backlash we've seen against outsourcing?
He really was a disaster for India. I mean, he carries a little Ganesh or something.
Yes,
but anybody could. I mean, you would have some figure there. It means nothing actually.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it could be anything.
He doesn't feel for India the way we think he does in terms of...
No, far from it actually.
Okay.
President Obama, from the beginning, from coming in, he's always been talking about outsourcing. And what does outsourcing mean? It's a code word for India.
Sure.
What else, really? And he keeps doing it.
But do you see that as mere election rhetoric, or do you think that has serious ramifications?
He's been doing it from the time he first came in.
Right.
Entire 4 years. So and he did that also during the election, and so did the other Democrats like Charlie Schumer, Barbara Boxer, Nancy Pelosi, even my senator from New York, who is a very sensible woman. In the last 3 weeks, she was also talking about outsourcing. And so
But it goes beyond political posturing is what you're saying. And do you think the Indian authorities are not doing enough to make a point that they clearly don't like it?
I think what we ought to do, and this is my suggestion, I mean, I say we are into the Hindi Amriki bye-bye phase.
Right, right.
Just like we were with Hindi Chini bye-bye. But that doesn't mean you should have your eyes closed. I think the time has come now to tell Obama, this is really the wrong thing to do. It really spoils the ethos, creates anti-Indian sentiment. Like, why did that crazy neo-Nazi guy go after the Sikhs? They think, outsourcing means Indians are taking away jobs from them. Then they see Indians coming into the United States, like these poor Sikhs in the temple. They say, they're taking our jobs away right here.
Right.
That then creates a sense of agitation, the dot busters, all sorts of things, you know.
And it's President Barack Obama who's also reinforcing and feeding it.
He's feeding it all the time.
Right. And is that something that will become...
We are so Darshan oriented. And you know, he calls up Prime Minister and he melts. Right? So he's playing games with us. I think we should now simply say, I mean, there's no option except to be friendly with the Americans. I mean, we are natural allies.
But at the same time...
But now we've got to say, look, this is bad. And if you continue doing it, we are going to retaliate in our own way.
Right. And we don't seem to be sending across that message
We don't, because anytime he wants something, we give it to him.
Right.
And I mean, I have theories as to why. So this is something we ought to tell him. He's got to stop.
Okay, very strong words there, but let's throw it open to our panel with that. I want to come to Mr. Vishnu Dusad first. Sir, do you agree with what Mr. Bhagwati said, that Obama is probably the worst president for India purely from an outsourcing point of view, that he's playing games with India?
No, as far as Professor Bhagwati's comments in terms of what do we need to do with the US, or for that matter the rest of the world is concerned, I couldn't agree more with him. We do need to be very clear in our minds as to what do we want, and we need to get our message across to whomsoever he may be it President Obama or whomsoever. So I do agree with Professor Bhagwati that yes, he has not been very friendly, or rather he has not been friendly at all with India. His speech at the Parliament, of course, was heartwarming, but when it comes to real policies, he's trying to squeeze us, and that's what we need to stop.
Do you agree, Mr. Pankaj?
Messages across.
Mr. Pradeep Udas, do you agree with that? I mean, is it like Mr. Bhagwati says, or like Mr. Dusad has said, time for India to send a clear message to Obama that they don't approve of his outsourcing policies or his protectionist policies?
Yes, I do agree with my friend Vishnu and also Professor Bhagwati, because it's been now 4 years and the same rhetoric has continued, despite having where Indian industry has made a case as how it actually helps the US economy. When President Obama was in India, I presented a paper to him which we had written along with USIBC, where we talked about the lessons that US can learn from India and India from US, and we discussed that how this talent actually can help the US, and it was well appreciated. But when it comes to the local politics, somehow it goes there, and I think I agree with Professor Bhagwati that our Prime Minister should be firm, and business friendship is friendship, business is business, and we should really negotiate hard on this issue.
Okay, Mr. Murugesh, most of the IT industry, barring a few people, really cheered the re-election, but yes, it may not ultimately make much of a difference from an overall standpoint, but would you have preferred Romney, say, to an Obama, in this current given circumstance? And that's largely because Republicans are often seen as more business friendly, definitely more outsourcing friendly.
Well, not necessarily. From my personal point of view and from the company's point of view, we just feel happy that there is certainty, and there is actually the president who's been re-elected. He's back in the saddle, and it's just back to business as far as we are concerned. From our perspective, I don't think, and though he's made some noises about outsourcing and offshoring and things like that, that's not the reason that the people really elected him back there. I think people have elected him back into the White House because they see him as someone who can really grapple with and actually solve the global business problems that we're seeing. And as far as we're concerned, therefore, we think it's back to business as usual, and it's up to us as individual companies and as a country to deliver high value solutions and just keep getting accepted, because let's face it, in spite of all of this, we're all seeing growth.
All right, I want to take that to Mr. Nivsarkar from NASSCOM. You've recently revised your growth targets. Is Obama's re-election really going to make a difference? Do you think it's going to be adding to the gloom, or it's not really anything that we should be worried about, or the IT industry should be worried about?
Well, we clearly think that the concerns are overplayed. And with all due respect to Professor Bhagwati, we clearly disagree with his point of view. Let's look at specifics, right? So we've had the same president for the past 4 years. Yes, he's been talking about outsourcing again and again. Mind you, a lot of that is also with respect to China, not just India. So it is first of all misplaced to say that when he says outsourcing he means only India. But So what has happened in the past 4 years? What we have seen is that the industry which was $63 billion in 2008 is today at $100 billion. So we've seen unprecedented growth even in the past 4 years that he was president. Yes, there are political compulsions. I mean, we have our own politicians who play to their constituencies and talk about foreign hands and issues beyond borders. And there will be rhetoric, but we have to separate the rhetoric from the actual policies. We haven't seen any specific policies in the past 4 years which have targeted India or targeted the Indian outsourcing industry of significance. I mean, we continue to grow. Our industry is accepted in the US as competitive, globally competitive, and as long as businesses in the US, customers in the US see the value, we don't see cause of concern.
All right, before I in fact go back to Mr. Dusad on really how the second term is going to play out, Mr. Murugesh, you said something very interesting, and on the back of that, I want to ask you, is the cost arbitrage, say, between India and countries now like Chile and Philippines probably now a bigger issue than really Obama's rhetoric?
Again, not necessarily, because let's face it, all of us are global companies, so we drive a global model, and we have to do whatever is right for our clients. So whether we are in India and Manila and Chile and so many other countries, those are not options anymore. Those are things that we need to do in order to be able to give our clients a global solution. But let's face it, the basic advantages that India has just in terms of skill, size, scale, and just the number of qualified, high value kind of people that we have here, most countries can't replicate. So let's face it, this is not a model that any politician can come in and change overnight. This is something that individual companies and the industry will keep working on by reinventing themselves and keep moving up the value chain such that they are driving change inside companies in the US. Right. And that's what we're all doing.
Right. Mr. Dusad, you sounded very clearly disappointed in Obama's first term, and let's discuss what the second term heralds. Do you in some sense see him softening his stance, because now the elections are behind us, there's really no pressure in terms of fighting another election. The rhetoric probably would mute a little bit.
The way I look at it is, while I did talk about getting our messages across to him, the bigger message, as Keshav has very correctly highlighted, is for ourselves, and it will always be for ourselves, as to how are we moving up the value chain and how are we really reinventing ourselves. We were getting CFL lamps some 8 years back, 10 years back from China, and now we have started getting LED lamps. So they have clearly moved up the value chain, and we as an IT industry, ITES industry, what is our roadmap of moving from CFLs to LEDs? That is what is important, and that is what will by default make sure that any politician cannot really affect whether it is whether he is saying it for rhetoric or whether he means it.
Okay, Mr. Nivsarkar, how is the second term going to play out? Because the whole sort of issue of visa rejections, the hike in fees, that was the big issue in the first term. Is the second term, are you really worried that the second term would be all about the proposals to hike or rather levy taxes on those companies that ship jobs abroad? Probably the issue where government contracts are not going to be accessible to outsourcers?
I'd like to take this question in two parts. The first part is about what is going to be the priority. The priority clearly for the administration is local growth. I mean, the US continues to face unemployment, continues to face challenges on growth, and the local economy is going to be the single largest priority for the president, the administration, and the Congress. There is this immediate fiscal cliff issue which they will have to address, but post that, clearly addressing the local economy is going to be of priority.
Yeah, in fact, I want to take that.
The second question which you asked me was about tax, jobs.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
The second question you asked me was about shipping jobs offshore and the tax levied on that. Now, we've gone through that entire proposed legislation with a fine print. We have to separate what is posturing versus what is actually written in the text. The entire policy is actually aimed at companies, American companies, who have profit centers overseas, and profit centers overseas which basically, and they do not repatriate their profits from offshore destinations to the US. It is not aimed at outsourcing. That is the political spiel given to that, saying that companies which send jobs offshore. But the entire policy is for American profit-making companies who do not repatriate their profits back to the US. So it has nothing to do with the outsourcing industry.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Udas? There's no serious threat of all of these proposals actually coming into effect?
No, I agree with NASSCOM's view. The tax proposal is more for what they call the offshoring of the profits, and so that I do agree. However, I do feel that I do feel that we need to move up the value chain, reinvent ourselves, and the business economics will be such that companies will end up working with India anyway, because we have the skill base, we have the scale, we built up the capability, reputation for quality, excellence, etc. So I think that business will happen. But like any nation, if you take a look at China negotiates very hard with America, even if they know that they depend on America for exports, and America also depends on them, but it's not only about moving up the value chain. This is in this geopolitical world, we have to use all our armory, whether you talk about the capabilities or the political negotiations, the global the power equations, etc. And we really need to look at the two nations as two major enterprises negotiating with each other and say, hey, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you, and this is good for you, this is good for me, and at the same time I'll deliver quality. I think we need to somehow start to come out of being a bit of forgive me for saying it, almost like subservient, saying you were giving us business.
Let's take that to Mr. Dusad. Would you agree that India needs to probably then change its approach towards how it does business with the US? We have this very sort of reverential standpoint when we deal with Obama, whether it's the media or for that matter it's the government. Do we need to lobby harder?
No, I couldn't agree more with Pradeep. I think while we have to keep upgrading our quality and keep moving up the value chain and so on, there is no reason whatsoever for us to continue to be within quotes reverential to any of the nations. We are all on the same planet, and we are all equal. So we must negotiate on equal terms. Maybe we are some 30, 40, 50 years behind on some of the technologies, but we have so many other things to offer. So we must negotiate, and we must negotiate hard.
Mr. Udas, you want to comment?
Yeah, just when President Obama came here, 2 years ago, that was the theme. That they himself said India is not a developing nation. India has arrived. And so we said, okay, so if we've arrived, we should talk like adults with each other. So at that times we will disagree, there may be a little tension, but at the same time we are friends, and we want to work together. And I think that's the kind of
approach that
we need at all levels. Whether the businesses, governments, trade associations, I feel that's how we should approach it.
All right, Mr. Dusad, do you want to comment?
Again, we can learn a lot from China on this particular account. The way human rights issue used to be used by the US in the 90s, and the way China used to just ignore it, or for that matter the way China has handled the currency appreciation issue. I think we can learn a lot from them and start using the similar tactics in our negotiations as well.
Mr. Murugesh, you want to come in and before that I just want to ask you a question. Given what we've discussed, the prospects of outsourcing from here on, is it going to only get worse from here with the US? Is it going to get better, or do you think it's just going to remain a status quo, probably with a little bit of tweaking here and there on the visa norms?
Well, that's a great question, and frankly, I'm actually a big bull, because let's face it, as we speak, nothing has really changed in terms of the global economic environment. It continues to do badly. We just spoke about the fiscal cliff, and in fact, again, President Obama's re-election means someone with 4 years of experience is back in the saddle. He now has to leave a legacy behind. He is going to do all the right things for the industry and essentially for America and the world, if you ask me. And look at what we offer. We offer, from our point of view, we think BPO is probably one of the best tools for the industry. It actually helps American companies be competitive, and frankly, we're not taking away anybody's jobs at all. We are constantly growing, creating new centers in the US as well, and creating new jobs there. So what we're seeing is, what we expect to see is a realization of some of the projections that some of the analysts have brought to the table. IDC, for example, is actually projecting that the BPM industry over the next 5 years should grow at a rate of about 19%, and that's significantly higher than what NASSCOM has been talking about. So obviously, there is a lot of hope for the business going forward from here. And again, it's going to be captured by the companies that have the right models, that have moved up the value chain, and right. It will be driven by higher educated people, higher quality kind of offerings, and that actually keeps me extremely positive.
Right. Before I come to Mr. Nisarkar, Mr. Dusad, very quickly to you, is that the same sort of bullish sense that you're getting from newer clients, or is it a wait and watch approach? Are they largely unperturbed with this re-election, or are they, now seriously worried?
No, I don't think they're worried or anything of that sort. I think the worry, if at all, would be more on the, global economic outlook. I hope, as Keshav has very correctly pointed, and there are enough advisors to President Obama, I hope he would handle this bipartisan issue in a much more matured manner. And in the process, things should settle down, in 2013.
Not too many concerns you're seeing on, these proposals for penalties for companies shipping their jobs overseas and so on. That concern is not still being sort of seen.
It doesn't really matter that much if you ask me, because the value add that we do is so high that it doesn't really affect the decisions. That's the way I would look at it.
Mr. Nisarkar, you were saying something?
Yes, I mean, that proposal, as I said earlier, is a taxation issue in the US, Republicans and Democrats not seeing eye to eye. But if there is one thing which both sides of the aisle agree on, it is the shortage of talent in the US. Ironically, even in the worst era of unemployment in recent times in the US, talent which is to do with STEM, that is science, technology, engineering and mathematics in the US, is still in a shortage. It is difficult to hire in the US. Even today, unemployment levels in high value talent, which Keshav was alluding to, is still difficult, and that is something which both the Democrats and the Republicans agree on. So if we see movement on the policy front, we are hopeful that it will be more constructive in seeing how high level talent in the US, or how the US can access global talent.
Okay, you know, I want to step aside from the concerns, Mr. Nivraskar, and ironic that I should be asking you this, but you know, could this whole healthcare, Obamacare, you know, that's largely going to be playing out now in the second term, actually prove to be a massive opportunity for Indian IT? I mean, we've sort of been reading reports on how tacitly jobs have been shipped overseas through sectors like agriculture and energy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, agriculture, I don't know what to comment on that, but the fact is, yes, every sector is which needs to stay innovative and stay competitive is an opportunity. So if you know, there is this, let me take a step back, right? There is this entire perception that the US companies are only American market. But if you look at the S&P 500, right, majority of the companies on the S&P 500 today, the American companies, have more than 50% of their business coming from outside the US. Now the way this entire relationship works is that, you know, the Indian industry works with the American companies to actually access newer markets. Purely solutions purely developed in the US would probably not be competitive enough to access a market in Latin America or in Africa or in Southeast Asia. Right. The Indian industry is actually helping American companies penetrate lower markets.
Right. So
now,
very quickly,
if they're opening up newer markets, is that job shift offshore? I don't know. I mean, it is just new business being developed.
All right. Mr. Udas, very quickly to you, last word. You know, any opportunity that you can derive out of this? 30 seconds.
Opportunity out of
the second term.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for our industry to now, as Keshav and were saying, that move up the value chain, and really for us to really be so well aligned with the global world, especially US and Europe, and playing a crucial role in their, as they ride through this crisis, that in future, 4 years later, they look at India and say, this, India actually, kind of helped us through this.
Right.
Okay, so that.
All right, we're completely out of time, but it's been a very interesting debate. This, of course, is just the beginning of the president's second term, and probably we do need to wait for more time to gauge whether the calls for anti-outsourcing will really get louder or whether they will mellow down. It's something that the Indian IT industry would be certainly watching very closely. With that, a big thank you to all our guests, and thanks for watching We Mean Business.